The market was alive with noise, full of strange voices and cruel laughter. Cages rattled as slaves shifted inside, their chains clinking whenever they moved. The smell of sweat, metal, and rotten food filled the air. Among the captives sat a young alien girl, her body thin but her eyes strong. She had been beaten, starved, and threatened, yet her spirit had not broken. Her master towered over her, a tall creature with gray skin and sharp teeth. His voice was harsh, echoing across the market as he shouted orders. Most of the slaves kept their heads down, afraid to displease him. But she was different. She refused to bow. She refused to lower her head, even when his whip cracked against the ground near her feet. The master hated her defiance. He wanted her spirit broken. He wanted her to crawl like the others, silent and obedient. Yet she continued to resist. She would rather starve than kneel. Her pride was her shield, but it was also her curse. That day the punishment became worse. The master tossed scraps of stale bread and rotten meat onto the ground. He sneered as he pointed at it, his voice cold. "Eat," he commanded. "Eat, like the animal you are." The other slaves turned their eyes away. Some closed their ears, unable to bear the humiliation, but she stayed frozen, staring at the scraps on the ground. Her chest rose and fell quickly, anger mixing with shame. She wanted to scream, but no sound came from her throat. When she refused, the master grew furious. He pressed his boot against her back and forced her down closer to the dirt. The bread and meat lay in front of her face. His claws dug into her shoulder as he snarled, "Eat, or I will make you regret it." Her hands trembled, her knees scraped against the rough ground. Hunger gnawed at her stomach like a fire, yet her heart screamed louder. She would not give him the satisfaction. She closed her eyes, refusing to open her mouth. The master pushed harder, his cruelty burning like a fire against her skin. "You are nothing," he spat. "You are filth, and you will eat like filth." The crowd of onlookers laughed. To them, it was a show. The slaves were entertainment, and her humiliation was a prize. They pointed and whispered, their eyes filled with mockery. But even in that moment of shame, her spirit glowed. She lifted her head just enough to meet the master's eyes, and in her gaze burned a silent fire. That fire angered him more than any refusal. He slapped her across the face, the sound cracking through the air. The crowd cheered. She fell to the ground, her lips bleeding, yet her eyes still held the same fire. She was weak, but she was not broken. The master ordered her again. "Eat," he growled. He pressed his foot harder against her back. Her chest shook as tears formed, but she still did not obey. Her pride was stronger than her hunger. The minutes dragged on. The market noises continued, but around her silence grew. The other slaves dared not look, yet they felt her strength. Even beaten, even forced to the ground, she had not surrendered. In that silence, she became more than a slave. She became a symbol. The master realized it too. His face twisted with rage because her defiance was more dangerous than any weapon. It gave hope to the others. He leaned down, his teeth bared, and whispered into her ear, "I will break you. If not today, then tomorrow. You will beg me to let you eat from the dirt." She shivered at his words, but inside, she clung to her pride. She would not let him see her fear. As the crowd lost interest and moved away, the girl lay on the ground, her stomach empty, her body shaking, her lips swollen. Still, she held onto her pride. She whispered to herself, her voice barely louder than a breath, "I am not an animal." The words gave her strength. They reminded her that no matter what chains bound her body, her soul remained free. The master could whip her, starve her, force her to crawl, but he could not erase who she was. What she did not know was that far across the market, in the middle of the shifting crowd, someone had been watching. A pair of human eyes had followed every moment, burning with quiet anger. He had seen the cruelty, he had seen her defiance, and in his heart, he knew something was about to change. The master thought he had won, but in truth, this was the beginning of the end. Because soon, the girl would not be alone. The market was still loud, filled with shouts, haggling, and cruel laughter. Yet in the middle of all that chaos, a human man moved quietly through the crowd. His cloak was worn from travel, dust covering his boots, but his eyes were sharp. He was not here to buy slaves. He had come for supplies, maybe fuel, maybe food, but not this. Still, his steps slowed when he reached the row of cages. Something in the air pulled his attention. The smell of dirt and blood mixed with the sound of chains. He had seen alien markets before, and he hated them all. Every time he passed through one, his heart carried the same weight. Yet this time, something was different. His gaze fell on her. The alien girl was still on the ground, her cheek bruised, her lips cut, but her head lifted just enough to show her defiance. The scraps of food still lay untouched in the dirt, flies circling above them. She had chosen hunger over humiliation, and her body trembled with the effort. The human froze. For a long moment he could not move. Her eyes were not like the others. They were filled with pain, but also with fire. A fire that had survived beatings, starvation, and cruelty. It was a fire he recognized. He had seen it once before, in the mirror, long ago, when he had fought to survive against impossible odds. His chest tightened. This girl was not just another captive. She was fighting a battle that only he seemed to see. The master noticed the human watching. With a grin, he stepped closer, spreading his arms as if to show off his prize. His gray skin glistened under the dim light, his sharp teeth flashing as he spoke. "Interested, human? She is stubborn, but I can give her for a good price. She has spirit, but spirit can be broken." The human did not answer right away. He kept his eyes on the girl. She tried to avoid his gaze at first, ashamed of the dirt on her face, the blood on her lips. But curiosity forced her to glance up. Their eyes met. For a brief moment, time slowed. The crowd, the noise, even the master's voice seemed to fade. The girl expected the human to look at her with the same disgust others always showed. But his eyes were different. They did not mock, they did not pity. Instead, they held something she had not seen in a long time: recognition. As if he saw her not as property, not as filth, but as someone who mattered. Her heart skipped. She quickly looked away, afraid of believing what she saw. Hope was dangerous. Hope could kill faster than hunger. The master laughed, breaking the silence. He leaned closer to the human. "You see her fire, don't you? You think it makes her valuable, but it makes her weak. She will never obey, not without pain. She must be broken. She will crawl, she will beg, and one day she will learn." The human clenched his jaw. His hand curled into a fist at his side. He had seen enough. He wanted to strike the master right there, but he knew better. The market was filled with guards. A fight now would mean death for both him and the girl. Still, the thought of walking away burned his soul. He told himself he had no reason to get involved. No reason to risk his life for someone he did not know. But deep inside, he knew he would never forgive himself if he turned his back. The girl lifted her head again. Her eyes searched his face as if silently asking a question. Would he ignore her just like the others? Or would he do something? The human felt the weight of that question. He had lived through battles, through loss, through bloodshed. He had learned that sometimes one small choice could change everything. And now in this filthy market he felt that choice pressing against him. The master grinned wider. "So, human, do you want her? She can be yours to command. Feed her from the ground, punish her until she obeys. I promise you she will crawl eventually." The human's eyes darkened. He took one step closer, his voice low but steady. "No," he said. "She will never crawl." The master blinked, surprised. The girl's eyes widened, a spark of disbelief crossing her face. For the first time, she heard someone speak words that sounded like freedom. The human turned away slightly, his mind racing. He had not planned this. He had not planned to interfere. Yet his heart had already made the choice. He would not leave her here, not like this. He walked away into the crowd, but his eyes stayed sharp, watching every corner of the market. He would wait for his moment. The master thought he had control, but the human knew the truth. A storm was coming. And when it arrived, the girl would never be forced to eat from the dirt again. The market grew busier as the day went on. Voices rose, deals were made, and creatures from different worlds passed through the crowded alleys. Yet in the middle of all that chaos, the girl felt only silence. Her master's voice still echoed. In her ears, his threats, his laughter, his cruelty. The taste of blood was sharp on her lips. She pressed her hands against the dirt, steadying herself, refusing to fall. She thought the human had gone. Men like him never stayed. They looked, they judged, and then they left, just as the others always had. But a strange feeling made her lift her head, and there he was. He had not disappeared into the crowd as she feared. He was still there, standing at a distance, half hidden by the shifting mass of buyers and sellers. His cloak covered most of his face, but his eyes were fixed on her. Her breath caught. For a heartbeat, she forgot the chains around her wrists, forgot the dirt under her nails. She could not look away. The connection was silent, but it was real. She saw no mockery in him, no hunger, no cruel amusement. His eyes were steady, calm, and filled with something she could not name. It frightened her. Hope was dangerous. She had seen it destroy others. A kind glance, a gentle word, and the captives would cling to it, only to have it ripped away when the cruelty returned. She had promised herself she would never fall into that trap. She would not believe in saviors. Yet the human's gaze held her. The master noticed her distraction. He struck her shoulder with the back of his hand, forcing her down again. Look, at the ground, he barked. Not at him, you are nothing. The crowd chuckled, but the human's expression did not change. His fists tightened under his cloak. He could not strike, not here, not now. But the anger inside him grew hotter with every passing second. The girl closed her eyes against the sting, but when she opened them, she found the human still watching. He had not turned away, not even after the blow. And that small detail pierced deeper than any weapon. Others always looked away when she was punished. He did not. The master leaned close to her ear, his whisper sharp like a knife. Do not look at him. You belong to me. But her heart betrayed her. It pulled her gaze back to those human eyes that would not leave her. A shiver went through her, not of fear, but of something unfamiliar. Something almost like trust. The human tilted his head just slightly as if telling her to hold on. No words passed between them, but she understood. He was not here to break her spirit. He was here to see if it could survive. For the first time, in years, she felt less alone. The moment passed quickly. Guards pushed through the crowd, their weapons gleaming, shouting at buyers to keep moving. The human stepped back, melting into the sea of creatures. She panicked for a moment, thinking he was gone forever. But then, just before he vanished into the market's shadow, he glanced back once more. That single glance anchored her heart. It was a promise. The master continued his cruelty, dragging her by the chains, forcing her to kneel before new customers, bragging about how cheap she was. She heard his words, but they no longer cut as deeply. A seed had been planted. The human had seen her as more than property, and even if nothing came of it, that memory would live inside her. Night began to fall over the market. Fires burned. In iron pits, their smoke curling upward. The slaves were herded into corners, fed scraps locked behind iron bars. The girl curled against the wall, her body aching, her stomach empty, but her mind restless. She closed her eyes and whispered to herself, "He saw me." No chains, no beatings, no hunger could erase that truth. Someone had seen her. And far away, on the edge of the market, the human sat in silence. His hand rested on the hilt of his blade, his mind replaying the moment their eyes had met. He had faced soldiers, monsters, and enemies without fear. Yet the look in her eyes shook him more than any battle. He knew what it meant. He could not walk away. The connection was silent, but it had already changed them both. Tomorrow the master would still try to break her. Tomorrow the market would still be cruel. But tomorrow the human would not simply watch. Something was coming. something no one in that market expected. The night was heavy over the alien market. Fires burned low in the iron pits, their smoke drifting upward, filling the air with the scent of ash and grease. The crowd had thinned, leaving only the guards and a few drunken buyers stumbling between the stalls. Most slaves had been locked, back into their cages, chains clinking softly as they tried to rest. The girl sat alone, her wrists bound to the cold bars behind her. Her body ached, her stomach twisted from hunger, but her eyes stayed open. She could not sleep. The memory of the human's gaze would not leave her mind. She replayed it again and again, the calm strength in his eyes, the way he had refused to look away. She whispered the thought to herself like a prayer. He saw me. Not far away, hidden in the shadows of an abandoned stall, the human remained awake too. He had meant to leave, to buy his supplies and continue his journey, but his heart had chained him here as surely as the girl's wrists were chained to those iron bars. He leaned against the wall, his blade resting on his lap, his eyes locked, on the cages across the square. He knew what he was planning was madness. The market was crawling with guards, and the master who owned the girl had powerful allies. If the human was caught, he would be killed without mercy. Yet every time he thought about turning away, he remembered the fire in her eyes. That fire reminded him of who he used to be, before war had hardened his soul. He told himself one truth. If I leave her here, she will die inside, even if she survives. If I take her, I might die, but at least she will live. The decision formed slowly, like a blade being sharpened in the dark. By the time the moonlight touched the edge of the market, the human had already chosen. He would act. The master stumbled back into view, drunk on victory and arrogance. He had just finished selling 2 other slaves and now returned to mock the girl again. He threw a bone near her feet, laughing loudly. "Eat," he ordered. His words slurred. "Eat like the dog you are." The girl did not move. Her lips stayed shut, her eyes blazing. She would rather starve than crawl. The master raised his whip, eager to strike, but before the lash could fall, a voice cut through the smoke. "Enough." The master turned, blinking in surprise. The human stood there, tall and steady, his cloak pulled back, his blade glinting under the firelight. His voice was low, but it carried through the silence. "She is not an animal." The guards shifted uneasily. The crowd that remained leaned closer, curious to see what would happen. The master grinned, showing sharp teeth. "So the human speaks. Do you want her? You can have her for a price. But I warn you, she is stubborn. She will break your patience." The human's eyes narrowed. "She will not break, she will not crawl." The master laughed, waving the whip lazily. "Strong words, human. But this is my market, my property. You do not decide what she is." The human stepped closer. His hand rested on the hilt of his blade, though he had not drawn it yet. His voice dropped even lower, each word sharp as steel. "Then I will take her." The master's grin faded. He signaled to the guards, who raised their weapons. "You dare steal from me?" The human did not flinch. He looked at the girl once more. For a brief second, their eyes locked. She felt her chest tighten, her breath catch. This was no trick, no cruel joke. He was serious. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel it. Hope. The master's laughter returned, louder, harsher. "Very well," he sneered. "Try to take her, if you can." The human's decision was complete. There was no turning back. His blade slid free from its sheath, gleaming in the firelight. The crowd gasped as the first guard stepped forward, only to be met with steel flashing across the air. The sound of the strike echoed, followed by the heavy thud of a body hitting the ground. Chaos erupted. The guards rushed to surround him, weapons drawn, voices shouting. The human moved with precision, every step calculated, every strike filled with purpose. He was not fighting for glory, not for power, but for her. The girl pressed against the bars, her eyes wide. For so long she had believed no one would ever stand for her, that she would always be alone. But now, in front of her, a human fought, an army for her freedom. The market burned with noise, the clash of steel, the cries of guards. And through it all, the human's voice rang out once more, steady and unyielding. She will not crawl. The market exploded into chaos. Shouts rang out, weapons clashed, and the smell of blood mixed with smoke from the burning fire pits. Creatures scattered in every direction, some running for safety, others staying to watch the rare spectacle of a human daring to fight against the master's guards. The human moved like a storm. His blade flashed in the firelight, striking with precision. He dodged, stepped forward, and struck again, every movement smooth and controlled. 2 guards fell, their weapons clattering against the stone floor. Another lunged at him with a spear, but the human caught the shaft, twisted it sharply, and sent the guard crashing to the ground. The master roared with fury. He grabbed the girl by her chains and yanked her forward, holding her between himself and the human. His sharp teeth gleamed as he snarled. "You fight for her, human? Then you will watch her bleed." The girl's wrists burned against the iron, shackles as she struggled. Her body was weak, but her spirit would not let her stay still. She turned her eyes to the human, silently begging him not to give up. The human's chest heaved as he stood across from them. He raised his blade slowly, his voice steady. "Let her go." The master only laughed. "She is mine." The crowd gasped as the master pressed a claw against her throat. For a moment it seemed hopeless, but then, with a sudden burst of strength, the girl kicked backward, slamming her heel against his knee. The master staggered, his grip loosening just enough. The human moved instantly. He crossed the distance with a single step and swung his blade downward. The chain around her wrists shattered under the strike. Sparks flew as the broken links scattered to the ground. The girl stumbled free, gasping for breath, her eyes wide with shock. He caught her by the arm and pulled her close. "Run," he said, his voice sharp. "Stay behind me." The master howled in rage, calling for every guard in the market. Alarms rang out, echoing through the iron walls. More guards poured in, weapons raised, their heavy boots pounding against the stone. The human tightened his grip on the girl's hand and began to move. He slashed at the first guard that blocked their path, then kicked another aside. The girl stumbled, still weak from hunger, but she forced her legs to follow. Her chains rattled with every step, but her heart beat with something she had not felt in years: hope. They darted through the crowded stalls, overturning tables and barrels to block their pursuers. Angry vendors shouted, frightened creatures screamed, and the night filled with confusion. The human pushed forward, his blade cutting a path through anyone who tried to stop them. Behind them, the master's voice thundered. "Catch them! Bring me her head!" The girl's breath came fast and shallow. Her bare feet scraped against the rough stone, but she did not stop. The human's hand pulled her forward, his strength guiding her through the maze of alleys. She could feel his determination in every step. They reached a narrow passage between 2 crumbling walls. The human shoved her inside first, then followed, blocking the way behind them with fallen debris. The sound of boots and shouts echoed from the other side, but for the moment they had a few precious seconds. The girl collapsed against the wall, trembling. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her throat dry. She looked at him, eyes wide, still unable to believe what was happening. "Why?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Why save me?" The human wiped sweat from his brow, his blade still in his hand. His answer was simple. "Because you are not an animal." Her lips parted, but no words came. For so long she had been treated as less than nothing. Now someone had called her human in spirit, even if she was not of his kind. Her eyes burned with tears she could not stop. The noise of guards grew louder. The human turned sharply, scanning the shadows. He grabbed her hand again. "We are not safe here. We have to keep moving." They slipped out the other side of the passage, into the dark alleys at the edge of the market. Torches flickered behind them, shouts drawing closer. The human led her down winding paths through abandoned stalls over broken fences. Every turn was a chance for escape, or a trap. The girl stumbled once more, her body shaking from exhaustion. The human caught her before she fell, steadying her with one arm. "Just a little farther," he urged. "Hold on." She nodded weakly, forcing her legs to move. She did not understand why he risked his life for her, but she would not let his effort be wasted. Finally, they reached the outer gates of the market. 2 guards stood watch, but before they could raise their weapons, the human struck like lightning. His blade cut through the first, his boot sent the second sprawling. He pushed the heavy gate open with all his strength, the hinges screeching. Cold night air rushed in. Stars shone above, free and unchained. The girl gasped as the sight filled her chest with something she had almost forgotten, the feeling of freedom. The human pulled her through the gate and into the wilderness beyond. The market roared behind them, alarms still echoing. But ahead of them stretched the open world. For the first time, she was no longer crawling in the dirt. She was running toward a life she never thought possible. The night stretched wide and endless beyond the gates of the market. The stars shimmered above like 1,000 silent watchers, and the air was colder than the smoke-filled square they had left behind. The human guided the girl through the rough ground, his hand steady on hers as they moved deeper into the wild. Every sound of pursuit faded slowly behind them, the shouts growing faint until only the sound of wind and the crunch of their footsteps remained. The girl stumbled often, her body weakened from hunger and long days of punishment. Her legs shook, her bare feet raw against the stones and dirt. Still she pushed forward, refusing to let go of the hand that held hers. The human noticed her strength even in weakness, the way she refused to collapse fully, the way she forced herself onward, even when her body begged her to stop. At last, when he judged they had put enough distance between themselves and the market, he slowed. He scanned the area carefully, his eyes sharp in the dark. Ruins lay scattered across the land, broken walls from some forgotten settlement. He led her toward one of the larger stone structures still standing, its roof half caved, but its walls strong enough to shield them from the cold wind. Inside the ruin, the air was damp and heavy with dust, but it was safe. The human guided her to a corner and helped her sit against the wall. She sank down, her chains rattling softly, her chest rising and falling as if she had run 1,000 miles. He knelt beside her, pulling a small pouch from his cloak. From it, he took a piece of dried bread and a strip of cured meat. He placed them in her hands gently, not forcing, only offering. The girl stared at the food for a long moment. Her stomach twisted with hunger, but her pride made her hesitate. Every scrap she had been given before had been thrown at her, forced into the dirt, made to humiliate her. She lifted her eyes, searching his face, waiting to see the same cruelty. But he did not sneer. His eyes held no command, only quiet patience. He nodded once, as if telling her the choice was hers. Her hands trembled as she lifted the bread. She took a bite, small at first, then larger as the taste filled her mouth. Tears stung her eyes as she swallowed. For the first time in years, she was eating without shame. She was not crawling, not scraping food from the dirt. Someone had handed her food with dignity, and it broke something inside her, something hard, that she had built to survive. The human watched in silence, his heart heavy. He had seen starving children before, soldiers broken by war, but this moment struck him deeper than any battlefield. He could see the gratitude in her eyes, but also the pain of remembering what she had endured. When she finished, she leaned, back against the wall, her voice a whisper. Why? He looked at her for a long moment before answering. Because you deserve more than chains. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She turned her face away, unable to meet his eyes. She had been told her whole life that she was nothing, that she was property. Now here was someone telling her she was worth saving. The weight of those words was too much to carry all at once. The night grew colder. The human gathered pieces of wood from the ruin and built a small fire. The flames flickered weakly at first, then grew stronger, casting light across the broken walls. The girl pulled her knees to her chest, letting the warmth touch her skin. She watched the human as he sat on the other side of the fire, his blade resting within reach, his eyes always alert. For a long time, neither spoke. The silence was not heavy, not cruel, but calm. The crackle of the fire and the sigh of the wind filled the space between them. Finally, the girl whispered again, "You risked your life. You could have died. Why not leave me?" The human lifted his gaze, the firelight reflecting in his eyes. His voice was steady. "Because I could not walk away. I have seen too much cruelty to let it stand when I can. Stop it. And because I saw you fight, even in chains you did not bow. That kind of strength should not be wasted." Her throat tightened. No one had ever called her strong before. She lowered her head, hiding her tears behind the shadows of the fire. The human did not press her. He leaned back against the wall, keeping watch while she curled closer to the fire. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of exhaustion without fear. She allowed her eyes to close, knowing someone else was guarding the night. As she drifted toward sleep, her last thought was a quiet one. Maybe she was not alone anymore. Maybe trust, fragile as it was, could survive. On the other side of the fire, the human stayed awake, his hand resting on the hilt of his blade, his mind sharp. He had chosen to save her, and he knew the danger was far from over. But as he watched her sleep, her face softer now than it had been in the market, he felt a resolve settle deep inside him. He would not let her be dragged back into chains. Not while he still breathed. The first light of dawn touched the ruins, spilling gold across the broken stones. The girl stirred awake, the faint warmth of the fire still clinging to the air. For a moment she panicked, expecting the sharp voice of her master, the crack of a whip, the iron chain pulling at her wrists. But when she opened her eyes, she saw only the human sitting near the entrance, watching the horizon, his blade across his knees. She blinked slowly, her chest rising and falling with relief. The air was cold, but it was freedom, and she could breathe it without fear. The human glanced back when he heard her shift. His face was calm, though his eyes held the weight of sleepless hours. He gave a small nod, as if to tell her it was safe. She sat up slowly, hugging her knees to her chest. Her voice was soft, almost uncertain. "They will come for us." "Yes," he replied, his tone steady, "but we will be ready." Her throat tightened. For so long, her future had been only chains, only dirt and cruelty. Now this human spoke, of tomorrow as if it belonged to them both. She struggled to believe it, but part of her wanted to. He stood, stretching his tired muscles, then offered her his hand. She hesitated, her pride resisting, but something deeper urged her forward. She placed her hand in his, and he helped her rise. Her legs trembled, but his grip was strong, grounding her. They stepped out into the wilderness together. The world spread wide before them, endless plains dotted with twisted trees, mountains rising faintly in the distance. The girl's breath caught as she looked around. For the first time in years, there were no walls, no bars, no cages, only sky and earth. Her heart raced with a mix of fear and wonder. She whispered, almost to herself, "I am free." The human glanced at her, his voice low but firm. "You were always free. They only wanted you to forget." The words struck deep, shaking something inside her. She lowered her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. She had fought for so long, holding her pride as her only shield. But now she realized she was not fighting alone anymore. They walked in silence for a time, the sound of their steps mixing with the wind. The human scanned the horizon carefully, always alert, but his presence beside her was steady like an anchor in the storm. At one point she turned to him, her voice trembling. "What will you do with me now?" He stopped walking, looking at her fully. His answer was simple. "Not with you, together. We will find a place where they cannot reach you, a place where you can choose your own life." Her chest tightened again, but this time with something warm. Choice. The word felt strange, almost foreign, yet powerful. They moved deeper into the wilderness, searching for shelter, for safety. As the day grew brighter, the fear of pursuit never left them. They knew the master's rage would not end so easily. Yet with every step, the bond between them grew stronger. By midday, they reached the edge of a forest. The trees rose high and thick, their branches weaving a dark canopy. The human guided her inside where the shadows offered protection. He found a stream of clear water, letting her drink until her thirst eased. He shared what little food he had left, dividing it evenly without hesitation. The girl watched him closely as he worked. Every action he took was careful, deliberate, not for himself, but for her too. She had seen only cruelty from others, yet this human carried kindness without asking for anything in return. Her voice was quiet, almost broken. "I do not know how to trust." He met her gaze, steady and calm. "Then trust me slowly, step by step, until you know." Her lips trembled, but she nodded. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe it was possible. As the sun dipped lower, painting the forest in shades of gold and shadow, the girl sat beside the stream, her reflection rippling in the water. She saw her bruises, her scars, but also her eyes, still burning, still alive. The human sat across from her, sharpening his blade, but when he looked up, their eyes met once more. That same silent connection from the market returned, stronger. Now no chains, no master, no dirt could erase what they had begun. The girl whispered into the quiet air, her words carrying more strength than she realized. "I am not an animal." The human gave a small smile, his voice low. "No, you never were." In that moment, the future opened before them. It would not be easy. The master's shadow still stretched long, and the dangers of the galaxy were many. But together they had something stronger than fear. They had defiance, they had survival, and they had each other. As the stars returned above the forest, brighter now than the night before, the girl felt something she had thought lost forever: hope. And with hope, her new life began.